Hi and welcome to Silly Talk. I'm your host LL7 and I have gotten a request to do a book reading, and it's going to be a very special book reading for me, especially because it's one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book. Going into the bag. Did I give you a hint? Yes. It's Harry Potter messenger bag. Legit. And in said bag I have two books. A very fatty book. That one I won't be reading, but I just have to show you that. And what we will be reading. One of the best, if not the best. Well, I still think the other one's better, but I still think this one's the best, but I'm biased, so. It is Harry Potter. And if you haven't read it, you need to go out and buy and read it. It's probably the best book ever written. Series, like, amazing. JK, yeah. We're going to be doing readings. Obviously, best person is her. She does it the best, but I'll do my best. But basically, if you want to see a well-read book, that would be this. I read, I think it maybe 7 times. I'm going to go with 7, but I kind of did this twist. You know a book is well-read when it's falling apart. And I take very good care of my books. Like, this one's from 97, I think is the copyright. I read the 97 was the copyright. Yeah. So this is at least almost 10 years old, and it's pretty good condition. So, but this is the Order of the Phoenix, and it's my favorite. Just because it's the one with all the theories. I seriously came up with. I'll have to find them for you later. But there's a part in here where if you don't know Harry Potter, I would suggest you stop watching this and go and read them, because the rest of what I'm going to say is going to be absolute jargon to you. So basically, in this one, when they're cleaning out the drawing room, there's a locket that is found, and it's mentioned only in passing. And I'd have to find it. I mean, let's see, where kind of just broke it more. Awesome. I'll find it later if we'll do it in another segment. But basically, I can explain it without it. There's a locket, and it's just mentioned in passing, like a list of items. And then later on in the 6th one, there's another locket, and Harry has, and it's the locket when they're in the cave, and so they get it. But then Dumbledore, when he dies, it smashes open, and in it is the note, and he's like, I already found it, and it's R whatever the initials, and RB, and that's Sirius's brother Religus Black, and he had the locket, and they were at the Black house, and that is where the locket was and is. And so I just was like, oh my god, I know where it is. Like, but I couldn't. I was like, it was an epic theory. So, but yeah, I was like, the locket. It just said, oh, and he has it. He doesn't know where it is, but I do, because I figured it out. That's just one of the theories. I mean, if you know Harry Potter, you know there's like a gajillion theories, and I happen to be right on like all of them. So, yay! All right. To the reading of the very first Harry Potter. Probably one of the best. I can get the book open. Yes. The chapter is titled The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde, and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret. and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. They didn't think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended she didn't have a sister because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursleyish as it was possible to be. Dursley shuddered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son too, but they had never seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull gray Tuesday, our story starts. There was nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Dursley gossiped away happily as she wrestled a screaming Dudley into his high chair. None of them noticed a large tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, Mr. Dursley picked up his briefcase, pecked Mrs. Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal on the walls. "Little tykey," chortled Mr. Dursley as he left the house. He got into his car and backed out of No. 4's drive. It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar: a cat reading a map. For a second Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he had seen. Then he jerked his head around to look again. There was a tabby cat standing on the corner of Privet Drive, but there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back. As Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road, he watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said Privet Drive. No, looking at the sign. Cats couldn't read maps or signs. Mr. Dursley gave himself a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he drove toward town, he thought of nothing except the large order of drills he was hoping to get that day. So that's your first little twist. Very humorous. I absolutely love her. I mean, a bajillion other people, but it's just really wonderful. Great book. great book. So there you go, especially for Brian. I will find the thing and point out all my theories from the fifth one and all the things, and yes, anytime you want to chat me up about Harry Potter, I'm good.